Sagarika Ghose joined journalism 34 years ago in October 1991 when the field was male dominated. This, of course, did not stop her from becoming a rock star journalist and author. She has won many awards for her journalism, including the ITA Best Anchor Award from the Indian Television Academy and the C.H. Mohammed Koya National Award. In 2014, the Rhodes Project included Ghosh on its list of 13 famous women Rhodes scholars. She is currently Member of Parliament Rajya Sabha. In an interview with The Week, she spoke about the challenges of women in media, how she reacted to vicious trolling, and how the field became more democratized with the advent of television. So I was just wondering if you can start off by telling me a little bit about your career in media and what is the specific challenges you faced in media.
Well, Anjali, I joined journalism over 30 years ago in 1991.
Yeah.
In October 1991. I had just come back from Oxford University and I joined journalism. I joined the Times of India and I joined as a junior assistant editor as well as a correspondent. And at that time, the Times of India was a very different place from what it is today. We used to make pages on bromide. There were very few computers available. People used to handwrite. And pages used to be typeset, in those typesetting pages would be typeset and then sent to the printer. So it was a very different world. But it was a world where journalism was subject to a lot of checks, a lot of verification. The reporter sent the story to the desk sent it to the editor sent it to the next level editor, and finally it went to the chief sub editor. So, copy went through various levels of checking and verification before it finally made it to the page.
Right.
So it was very fact based, very truth based, verified, objective, established journalism. You had to be really sure of the facts to get them on the page.
Right.
There were a lot of problems at that stage because even at that stage, because I remember journalism was it was very male dominated. The men did the sort of so-called hard subjects, like defense and foreign affairs and home affairs, and the women journalists were supposed to do things like the sort of education and social issues, which was seen as soft subjects, which are not soft subjects actually. They're actually essential to our national progress. But at that time, that in that mindset, in the early 1990s, they were seen as so-called soft subjects. So women were mostly channeled towards those fields, and the men did the hard reporting. But all that changed, I would say, with the advent of television. Actually, after Times of India, I joined Outlook. I was in Times of India from 1991 to 1995. 1995, I joined the startup team of Outlook magazine. Outlook magazine began in 1995, and I was part of the startup team. And I was actually very fortunate because although women journalists in those days suffered from a lot of issues of not being considered for the same stories as the men, not being considered for the same beats as the men, not being able to spend the kind of time that the men spent in the newsroom. So women suffered from a lot of I would say disadvantages, and there were a lot of set attitudes against women. But I myself had very good bosses.
Okay.
I had an extremely good boss in Dilip Patgaonkar in the Times of India. He was a wonderful editor, and he was very interested that we all go beyond just the world of news. He would always say, you must read books, you must read essays, tell me what you're reading these days, tell me what your what kind of literature you're reading, what kind of other books you're reading, not just the journalism. He would always say, don't let your writing become imprisoned in journalese. You must try to have a sort of a larger perspective on issues and read widely. And I think I took that very seriously because I have been a voracious reader, and I read all through my journalistic career. I have been a reader. And then I joined Outlook magazine, and in Outlook I really had the best editor of my career, which is Vinod Mehta. He was a wonderful editor. He actually made no difference between male reporters and female reporters.
Mhm.
And he would send us off on all kinds of stories. And I remember one story that he sent me on. It was to interview the former ICS officers. The
Mhm.
ICS is the Indian Civil Service,
Mhm.
British Indian Civil Service.
Mhm.
And these former ICS officers who had been in service during independence, I mean, they were all in their 70s and 80s. They had all returned to India,
Okay.
and they had all come to the Masuri Academy, the IAS Masuri Academy. And they're all, they were reminiscing about the old days and how they had spent time in India. And he said, you go and do a story on that, go to Masuri. So I said, I've just actually had my kid, and I had
Mhm.
had my daughter at that time, and she was just about 2 months old.
Mhm.
And so he said, oh, just take the kid. Take the kid. So there was me, the kid, my daughter, the maid also, all of us in the train going up. And since I was going with an entourage, the photographer with me said, okay, then I'm also bringing my kids. And so he also with his wife, and we had a nice little party. So he was, in that sense, he was very inclusive. And
Mhm.
he was very willing to send a reporter, even a reporter like me at that time, who had literally a babe in arms,
Mhm.
with her kid to do a story. So that was a very that was a real shot in the arm for me. And he was always very encouraging of all of us women journalists who were there at that time. So Outlook was a big break for me. I
Mhm.
then joined the Indian Express. I joined Indian Express in 2002. So 2002 to 2005, I was in the Indian Express. There again, I had a very good editor, Shekhar Gupta. Again, a very democratic editor. He would also make no difference between men and women. But I think the real change in gender defined stereotypes in journalism came with the advent of television.
Okay.
Because when television news broke on the scene, that is
Mhm.
when you had women coming out and going into the field just as the male reporters were doing. And a
Mhm.
lot of women journalists then had the opportunity to go into the field, go with
Mhm.
their cameras, because in television is a hungry beast.
Mhm.
You have to keep feeding it with
Mhm.
news.
Mhm.
So you can't afford to discriminate between who's a man, who's a female, who's a male. You just have to send reporters out.
Mhm.
So that gives people a lot of opportunities, because you have to keep feeding this news machine with news.
Mhm.
So you don't so the sort of the structured gender inequalities that existed in the 1990s in the Times of India or in newspapers didn't exist in television, simply because it was too fast, too big, too quick. You just
Mhm.
didn't have time for uh, for gender divisions, actually. So I
Mhm.
think television brought a big change in gender defined roles. I had done also some a stint with the BBC World, with BBC
Mhm.
World Service. That was in 2002, 2004. I did Question Time India.
Mhm.
I joined CNN IBN in 2005.
Mhm.
2005 to 2014, I was in television. And I used to do a television show called Face the Nation and India 360. And then in 2014, the channel that I was working in, CNN IBN, was taken over by the Ambanis. And so a lot of us left. We left the channel, and I joined the Times of India again, back to the Times of India in 2014. By 2014, then from 2014 to 2020, I was inactively in the newsroom.
Mhm.
2020, that was COVID, so I kind of withdrew from the newsroom a little bit, and I was doing kind of my more or less my own writing.
Mhm.
And that was the case from about 2020 to about 2023. And in 2024, last year, I got an offer from the Trinamool Congress
Mhm.
to join the Rajya Sabha.
Mhm.
And so by then I was already, in my late 50s.
Mhm.
And I thought, in any case, my journalism is over. I'm not an active journalist anymore. I'm not actively in the newsroom. So I have now joined the Times of India, joined Parliament, I mean, have
Mhm.
joined Rajya Sabha,
Mhm.
and I am a parliamentarian.
Right.
So my career in journalism, I would say up to 2013,
Mhm.
we could do the kind of journalism that I think is journalism, which is
Mhm.
tell truth to power, do independent stories,
Mhm.
do stories in the public interest,
Mhm.
go to the field,
Mhm.
and do stories without political interference,
Okay.
right? 2014, with the advent of the BJP and the Narendra Modi led BJP, everything changed. The
Okay.
pressure on the media it became intense.
Mm-hmm.
There was an enormous amount of pressure on so-called independent journalists, particularly people like me who had also been part of the coverage of Gujarat and the Gujarat riots of 2002 and its aftermath. And there was a lot of pressure on independent journalists, a lot of pressure on the media.
Mm-hmm.
And today, I believe it's a sad story, but with few exceptions, like your outlet,
Mm-hmm.
you are the honorable exception, part of the honorable exceptions. But most of the mainstream media today
Mm-hmm.
has been completely captured by the
Mm-hmm.
government. It has become what we call the Godi media.
Mm-hmm.
So it's completely captured by the government. It's become an instrument of the government. It's become complicit in the BJP government, complicit with this particular politics that the BJP is trying to play, complicit with this politics of Hindu Muslim that the BJP is trying to play.
Mm-hmm.
And frankly, Anjali, the reason why I did uh, take up this offer of the Rajya Sabha, actually, it had come to me once before. And I had
Mm-hmm.
said no because I was, immersed in journalism. But
Mm-hmm.
the reason why I decided to take it up because I found there was no space for me in journalism anymore. There was
Mm-hmm.
no space to ask questions. There was no space to do independent stories. There was no space to, for truth-telling journalists. It's become very, very difficult.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Become
Right.
really difficult. And
Mm-hmm.
to the extent you've seen how we are trolled and how our tweets are sort of attacked and how we are personally attacked, personally
Mm-hmm.
slandered. So
Mm-hmm.
it's become extremely difficult
Mm-hmm.
for journalists, forget journalists, but forget women journalists, for all journalists,
Mm-hmm.
and particularly women journalists, because the way women journalists are attacked on social media
Yeah.
uh, is actually very alarming and very disturbing because
Mm-hmm.
we are attacked in very personal terms.
Mm-hmm.
We are attacked on the basis of our personal sort of personal appearance or personal lives, or very below the belt personal remarks are made at women journalists
Mm-hmm.
all the time. Male journalists are also attacked, but they are not attacked in the same sort of viciously personal terms
Mm-hmm.
as women journalists are attacked. So I would say that I had a wonderful time in all my years from 1990 to 2013 because I love field reporting. I
Mm-hmm.
love going into the field. I love, the Kumbh Mela is going on. I've covered the 2001 and 2013 Kumbh. I just love the written word. I love reporting. I love meeting people. So I love what I was doing. I love my job. But I increasingly felt that the values of journalism or the values of journalism that I hold dear,
Mm-hmm.
which is to tell the truth and to ask questions of every government, no matter which government, whether it's whichever political party it is, whether it's Congress or BJP or whoever, ask whichever government is in power questions. We have
Right.
to be able to ask questions.
Mm-hmm.
But that is not possible anymore
Mm-hmm.
because of the manner in which the media narrative is being set by the BJP. It's being directed by the BJP, and the BJP has completely captured the media. Uh, I would say that there's no space for the kind of journalism that our generation of journalists are used to doing.
Mm-hmm.
There's no space for that kind of journalism anymore. I mentioned in Times of India how we used to our stories used to always be very rigorously fact checked.
Yeah.
I don't see what kind of fact checking there is nowadays in media. I
Mm-hmm.
see all kinds of rumors and WhatsApp messages being passed off as news.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas in our time, what was news or what was printed was rigorously checked by
Mm-hmm.
3 4 layers of checkers. Uh,
Right.
and it was only verified, source based, fact based journalism that
Mm-hmm.
actually made it to the published page.
Mm-hmm.
Nowadays, anything and everything seems to be published.
Right.
That is very worrying. That is very
Mm-hmm.
worrying.
Right, right. And you were talking about how women journalists are trolled more viciously in terms of personal details and everything. So when you were trolled like that, were you very affected, or were you scared for your? I mean, were you scared,
Yeah,
affected, or how did you?
so in the beginning, I had some very serious trolling when I first started doing television,
Mm-hmm.
and it was really low level and kind of vicious,
Mm-hmm.
and entirely related to my appearance or how I spoke or what I was wearing, or all of that.
Mhm.
And then actually, when my good friend Gauri Lankesh, when she was killed,
Mhm.
uh, at that time, I also got a death threat after
Mhm.
she was killed, saying, you're next, me and four other women. And
Mhm.
so at that time, I was scared because, it had happened to Gauri, and Gauri I knew very well. And
Mhm.
Gauri and I were on the phone all the time. And she used to say, these people are trolling me. And I used to say, yeah, 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 but, it's all just trolling. They're not going to do anything. They're
Mhm.
just on, their bark is worse than their bite.
Mhm.
But then she was killed.
Mhm.
And so then I remember then I was really quite scared. And I did register a case with the police
Mhm.
about these death threats that I was getting.
Mhm.
And and the police, I think they're still trying to track down those threats.
Mhm.
So it
And
is
when you
scary. It's scary in the sense that it's coming from people who seem to know a lot about your life,
Mhm.
and they seem to be tracking you very closely. They seem to know my daughter was. They seem to know my daughter's school. They seem to
Mhm.
know my son's school.
Mhm.
So the level of detail that these trolls are able to investigate, that
Mhm.
scared me. That certainly did. And also, I think that at that time, we weren't really aware of how to deal with these kind of cyber
Mhm.
threats, how to deal with these kind of cyber, these kind of attacks online. And, they were all anonymous. There were
Mhm.
no names. And so in the beginning, so yeah, it was scary. But
Mhm.
now I kind of block most of it, and I've
Mhm.
developed ways in which to deal with it. For example, I will either ignore, I will block, or I will
Mhm.
simply not give out the kind of information I used to give out earlier. I used
Mhm.
to take social media very lightly earlier. I thought it was a fun, unimportant thing. So I used
Mhm.
to say all kinds of fun things, and I used to think it was just all very funny.
Mhm.
I'm very careful about what I say. I'm
Right.
very careful. And of course, as a public figure, you have to be even more careful. So I'm very careful about what I say. I weigh my words.
Mhm.
And I've realized you cannot engage with trolls. You can't
Mhm.
engage. Because the
Mhm.
more you engage, the more emboldened they
Mhm.
are. You just have to
Yeah.
ignore
Yeah.
and block. You just need to ignore. And
Yeah.
that's difficult to do because someone is abusing you in abusing you openly
Mhm.
in unrestrained ways, and there's nothing you can do except just ignore it. So
Yeah.
that's one
Yeah.
of the hazards of social media.
Right. Right.
I think it's kind of quite disturbing and scary, and it's also quite sort of, it's also quite sort of hurtful in a way because you think,
Yeah.
my God, I mean, I don't know these people, and yet
Yeah.
why are they full of so much hatred towards me? They have never met me.
Yeah.
I've never
Yeah.
met them. And what is it that they are so very upset about,
Mhm.
So it's
Mhm.
kind of it's sort of a little, it takes you aback. You get
Yeah.
taken, yeah.
Yeah. And you once said that you need a very thick skin to be in journalism. And how did you develop that thick skin? How do you develop the courage to do the kind of stories that you do? I mean, how, without being.
I always say that bravery is the infrastructure of journalism.
Mhm.
If you're not brave, you can't do journalism. And I mean, we are actually much less brave than the many stringers and the many rural reporters you have out there who are all reporting in very dangerous conditions,
Mhm.
who are reporting from small towns, reporting from localities, reporting from rural places where there are some very powerful forces who can actually harm them. And there have been
Mhm.
many journalists who have lost their lives actually because mafias and local goons and local thugs have just attacked them and literally and taken their lives for telling the
Mhm.
truth.
Mhm.
So I think that how do you develop the courage? I mean, I think you just have to believe in journalism, tell the truth. Yes, Satyameva Jayate, the truth matters. The truth is
Mhm.
important. Our
Mhm.
national motto is Satyameva Jayate. I always give this example that, uh, if three people are having a discussion, one person says it's raining and another person says it's not raining. What is the journalist supposed to do? Is the journalist supposed to take a midway role between saying somebody saying it's raining, somebody saying it's not raining? So therefore, the midway path is maybe it's raining. No, you're supposed to look outside the window and see if it's raining.
Mhm.
And tell the truth. Is it raining
Yeah.
or is it not raining?
Yeah.
No, you can't always be this balancing act. You have to just tell the truth. And
Mhm.
um, And I think the process of finding out the truth, the process of getting at the truth, that is important, that excites me. I think it's a constitutional duty. I think it's a democratic duty. And I think it's the sacred stone for journalists. They have to always be willing to pursue the truth.
Mhm.
Um, to combat the fake news, to combat all the lies out there, the fake
Mhm.
memes, the sort of the kind of misinformation, disinformation, propaganda, all of that is being put out there.
Mhm.
It is journalists who have to combat that.
Mhm.
It is fact-based, source-based, verified journalism
Mhm.
which can challenge this fake news industry. The fake
Right.
news industry cannot be challenged by any government.
Mhm.
Governments should not decide what is news and what is not news, or what is fake news or what is not fake news. Governments will have an interest in putting out fake news.
Mhm.
Governments have an interest in putting out propaganda. It is
Mhm.
only journalists.
Mhm.
It is fact-based, verified, source-based, truth-telling journalists
Mhm.
who can actually combat fake news. So I believe that that we have to develop the courage. We have to believe in the truth.
Mhm.
You've got
Mhm.
to believe that this is something. It's a calling. It's like
Mhm.
a calling.
Mhm.
It's my calling to do this. This is the role I play in the nation.
Mhm.
This is I am the fourth estate. I
Mhm.
am the press.
Mhm.
And this is what this is what I'm called upon to do as a constitutional duty.
Yeah.
So it's if you see it as a calling, then you
Mhm.
will develop the courage.
Right. And I remember watching an interview where you said that that you were relating this account where you had just joined journalism, and there was an editor who there was some
Yeah,
guy called Ranjan who he told him to cover some political rally or campaign or something,
yeah.
and he
That's
told you that
my first day in the Times
yeah.
of India, and there
Mhm.
was me and another male journalist, and the chief reporter said, and there I was, fresh back from Oxford, raring to do journalism in India, and wanting to get in there, and so there was me, and there was another male journalist, and so the who he was also a fresh recruit,
Mhm.
and so the chief editor looked at him and said, "You go, there's a rally in Jantar Mantar, political rally. Why don't you go and cover it and come back with a report?" And he
Mhm.
looked at me and said, it's very hot outside. Why don't you go to the library? So I said, okay, fine. I didn't know what that meant. I said, fine, I'll go to the library. So I went to the library.
Mhm.
Uh, and I was reading, read up some stuff. And then at some point I said, okay, fine, I've done some reading. Can I go home? And he said, yes, you can go home now.
Mhm.
Next day we come back and this guy comes with his report. He said,
Mhm.
his report had come out by a staff reporter.
Mhm.
And he said, you go up and do a follow up on that. And, you come back with another report. And he
Mhm.
looks at me and says, you go to the library. I was, then I thought, why is he sending me constantly to the library? Why should
Mhm.
I go to the library? I
Mhm.
think he was trying to be nice and trying to say that, oh, let me ease her into it. But, the attitude was the male reporter was up and running and he was going, getting the stories. I had to go to the library and sit in the library and do reading. Now, I didn't understand why he was doing that. So I said, actually, I also want to go and do the reporting. I also want to go for this rally. So he
Mhm.
said, huh, you also want to go? I said, yeah, I also want to go. So, it was at that time, it was as if I was pushing myself.
Mhm.
But I think, have to push yourself forward. You have to go out there, you have to offer copy, you have to offer your services, offer yourself as a person who can do the story. Yes, I want to go on this beat, I want to go on the story, I want to go and offer copy here, I can give this copy here. So you have to push yourself forward proactively, and that's when I think the seniors realize that she's also serious about journalism, and she wants to do the journalism that she wants to do journalism as the others do.
Mhm.
But there are problems. You see, for example, in political journalism, you can't spend long hours with politicians. You just can't do it. You can't sit till midnight and 1 o'clock in a politician's house
Mhm.
the way male journalists can.
Mhm.
They can do it. You can't do it. You can't.
Mhm.
That will be misunderstood. It will be
Mhm.
kind of, socially, it's not acceptable.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
plus, you may have responsibilities at home. Many women journalists are married. Many women
Mhm.
journalists have children like me, and you
Mhm.
have to go back. You're interested in finishing your work and going home, right?
Mhm.
Men
Mhm.
don't have to go home. The
Yeah.
men, they can go to what I call the glass club. The
Mm.
glass. the glass club.
Oh, okay. Mm-hmm.
Where they all go out drinking and they all form bonds while they're drinking in the press club. And that is a very exclusive zone.
Mm-hmm.
Men are able to form a very exclusive network of individuals who can meet outside the workplace,
Mm-hmm.
outside the work environment, and form a lot of key bondings and form friendships and form networks
Mm-hmm.
in the so-called, in what I call the glass club. And
Mm-hmm.
so forget the glass ceiling, you have the
Mm-hmm.
glass club. So
Mm-hmm.
in the glass club, women can't join because women have to go home and we have responsibilities at home. I always had responsibilities at home. I had to go home.
Mm-hmm.
So if my work ended at 7, I had to be home by 7:30. If my work
Right.
ended at 8, I had to be home by 8:30. But I
Mm-hmm.
couldn't sit till 11:30, 12:30 in the night being
Mm-hmm.
part of the glass club. And the
Mm-hmm.
glass club is where a lot of exclusive networks are set up between men,
Mm-hmm.
between senior men and junior men. And
Mm-hmm.
they form exclusive networks in which women cannot join. And you become excluded more and more from the social life of the workplace.
Mm-hmm.
The
Mm-hmm.
social life of the workplace is not something you can participate in simply
Mm-hmm.
because of the hours and the constraints on your time. So
Right.
I think there's a lot of lack of awareness about all of this, and I think there's a lack of awareness about the kind of exclusive zones that are set up in workplaces that keep women out.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and I think that I've spoken about this late. I've spoken about this in other places as well. That there needs to be forums of social interaction between the whole office, so that some groups are not left out of social interactions that others may be part of. So you
Right.
can't have social interactions that where a lot of networking and a lot of deal making, a lot of friendships are struck.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, you can't have those social interactions divorced from uh, the office life because one group of people can't attend because of timing and other issues, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
so this used to be the case. Like for example, my husband could always go and spend time with politicians in politicians' homes. He could spend time with other journalists and sit there till 11:30, 12. I couldn't. I had
Mm-hmm.
to go home. That's just how it's conditioned.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So in these ways, in these very intangible ways, and in sort of these subliminal ways, women do suffer. I think women fall back. And then
Mm-hmm.
what happens is, you see, you take time off when you become pregnant,
Mm-hmm.
and then you have a kid, and then you can't put in those kind of hours, and then you have to put. But I would say that if you want to do a job, and
Mm-hmm.
if you want to do a profession, you
Mm.
have to put your job first. So
Okay.
that's the
Over
thing.
your
You have
family?
to put your job first. No, you have to. You can have your family, but you have to put your job first because it's not fair on everybody else,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because
Mm-hmm.
you want time off or you want to do less work,
Mm-hmm.
you can't then deprive somebody else who's willing to do more work. So you
Mm-hmm.
have to put your job first. So I had to put my job first all the time. I would, I had very good support in my mother and my mother-in-law, and so I had my kids, and they grew up with lots of support. So I was fine that way. But it's a tough call. It's a
Mm-hmm.
very tough call.
Mm-hmm.
And when you come back from your maternity leave or your pregnancy, you've fallen three, four places behind, right?
Yeah.
Your
Mm.
place has been taken by someone much younger, uh,
Mm-hmm.
by someone without responsibility. You may be reporting into her or him,
Mm-hmm.
or they. You may be reporting into whoever they are,
Mm-hmm.
who have taken your place while you were away.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then it's never the same again because
Mm-hmm.
then you're always kind of in the slightly mummy category, auntie category, and then
Mm-hmm.
you become part of the office aunties who are always, whereas the young,
Mm-hmm.
unattached child
Mm-hmm.
without children people
Mm-hmm.
have that much more time and are taken into many leadership roles.
Mm-hmm.
So, so it is a tough call. It is a tough
Right.
call. I was
Right.
able to take on leadership roles when my children were a little older.
Mm-hmm.
Um, when my children a little older, I was able to take on leadership roles. But then, then you're in kind of a lateral space. You're more in the feature space, or you're in Sunday magazine, or you're in because by
Mm-hmm.
then the mainstream has been taken over by the men.
Right.
All the men you started with have
Mm-hmm.
streaked ahead because they never had any gaps. They've
Mm-hmm.
streaked ahead and they've gone through all the rungs. Whereas you have, because you took time off and you went away and then you came back and then you didn't have enough time.
Mm-hmm.
Even if you gave your job the priority, you didn't. You maybe there were times when you couldn't give that kind of time. So you
Yeah.
then get slotted into a kind of parallel track.
Mm.
So then in that parallel track, you can rise. But I mean, today, if you think about it, I mean, how many women 9 p.m. Television anchors are there? Okay, maybe there is one, but uh, 9 p.m. the 9 p.m. news is the prime time bulletin, prime time news bulletin. There are very few female anchors, are mostly men. Editors, chief editors, executive editors, mostly men. You can make it deputy editor. You can maybe make it even to sort of features editor. But will you make it to executive editor? Will you ever make it to editor in chief? Doubtful.
Is there anything we can do about it as a as a
Journalism
society?
exists in a microcosm of society, right? Journalism is part of society. It exists within the social network. So the head of finance is a man, the head of industry is a man, the head of sector is a man. So the head of social sector is a man. The major politicians are all men. Heads of the major ministers are all men. So the male editor slots in very easily into a power structure where all the other powerful sector, where all the other sectors are also equally dominated by powerful men. So the male slots in easily. Whereas a woman, you can become a chief editor, but often it's because you've inherited it, or it's your family business, or you've come at it from that angle. But if you've risen through the ranks, I can't think of a single woman editor-in-chief of a major national daily. Now there is, I think, there are more now. In our time, there wasn't a single woman who was the editor of a national daily. And simply because the men just slot in very comfortably with other men who are also at the heads of different professions. So
Right.
whoever the owner is or who the manager is will prefer the men, because heading all the other institutions are also all men.
Right.
So the male structure. So
Right.
so it's a very sort of it's a very difficult journey, I would say, and I
Yeah.
see it a lot in politics. I see it a lot in politics. I'll give you an example of something that I recently witnessed. Another woman politician who's not in my party, in a different party, she was told, we were sitting in the lobby together, in the parliament lobby, and her party leader came up to her and said, I want you to speak on the budget, right? On the budget, please give a budget speech. And her male colleague, who was sitting next to her, said, "Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. She'll speak well on the budget. She runs a kitchen, so she knows exactly how to, what prices are of vegetables. She knows all about the kitchen. She'll give you all details about the kitchen." And I felt like saying, why should she just talk about the kitchen if she's going to speak on the budget? I mean, she can talk about the kitchen, but she'll talk about a lot of other things. There's a lot of other things in the budget.
Yeah.
So I found it odd that he would look at her and say, she'll speak on the kitchen. वो रसोई चलाती है, वो रसोई की बात करती है,
Yeah. Yeah.
There are these set attitudes, so many set attitudes. Um, there are all kinds of attitudes like this. So I think we live in a deeply misogynist society. We live in a very, very patriarchal society. We are a sun worshipping and a sun worship, sun, sun. We worship the sun, and we also worship the son, sun. So we're a sun worshipping patriarchal society. And women who are able to get ahead, or journey up the professional ladder, do so in spite of the system, not because of the system.
Right.
I mean, look at women's sports. Look at the sportswomen. I mean, look at Vinesh Fogart, what she has had to go through, and she's an Olympic medal-winning sportswoman. She's a big medal-winning wrestler. So, I
Yeah.
mean, look what she's had to go through. So, I think that women who succeed in India, by and large, they succeed in spite of the system, not because of the system. They
Right.
have to put in a Herculean amount of effort, and they have to have massive, stamina, staying power, tenacity, fighting spirit. That's why they're all a little bit a lot of women politicians are a little bit crazy, a little bit mad. And I've written an article on this, that they cultivate a kind of designer insanity, a kind of sort of mad streak, because
Mm-hmm.
if you're a little bit off, then
Mm-hmm.
people are quite scared of you. But if
Mm-hmm.
you're sweet and soft and docile and you're small and you're in your sari,
Mm-hmm.
everybody will walk all over you. But if you're a
Mm-hmm.
little bit crazy, then
Yeah.
they're a little scared and they keep to their boundaries. So if you look at Jayalalitha, if you look at Indira Gandhi, or if you look at many women leaders today, they are supremos. Those who have been supremos
Mm-hmm.
have to cultivate a certain kind of erratic, um, a sort of erratic kind of mercurial persona.
Mm-hmm.
They may not be those mercurial personas. Maybe they're very sweet, timid people
Mm-hmm.
in private. But if you don't have that mercurial, flashy persona, I
Mm-hmm.
mean, the men will walk all over you.
Right.
So, and you're small and you're in a sari, and it's so easy to trample all over you. So you
Right.
have to make yourself heard, and to make yourself heard, you have to be unafraid to stand out in a crowd. You have to be
Right.
different, you have to be exceptional, you have to be, as I said, a little bit crazy.
Right. And what is your wish list for what do women want in media? Coming to the theme of the article, like if you were to say five
I
things
think
that
what
you,
women
yeah.
want in media is equal opportunities, opportunities for professional opportunities, opportunities to make the most of their talents and skills,
Mm-hmm.
opportunities as much as the men have in terms of reporting, in terms of
Mm-hmm.
anchoring, in terms
Mm-hmm.
of in terms of doing challenging stories, in terms of doing in-depth reporting. I
Mm-hmm.
think women want the same opportunities as men. I think women want opportunities to tell the truth, to do
Mm-hmm.
truth telling, objective, real journalism.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of women would also like to do stories on the incredibly important issues of our times that are getting neglected, like mental health,
Mm-hmm.
like family issues, like the generation gap, like gender
Mm-hmm.
injustices, crimes against women,
Mm-hmm.
crimes in families,
Mm-hmm.
domestic violence.
Mm-hmm.
These are only just now being talked about in the mainstream media in Western countries, and they are just not talked about here at all.
Mm-hmm.
Domestic violence, crimes against women,
Mm-hmm.
gender justice within
Mm-hmm.
families,
Mm-hmm.
uh, gender justice in the workplace. I think a lot of these issues are repressed in our society, and we don't talk about them enough, and we don't, discuss them openly enough. So I think women want equal opportunities. Women would like to tell the truth. Women would like to do stories that uncover the hidden layers of hypocrisy and double standards of our society. Women would like to question the so-called traditional morality that is being forced on women, so-called moral policing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of women in media want uh, that they not only that they can find their space and find their voice and find visibility, but that they can also have the freedom
Mm-hmm.
to do the stories that matter, and the stories that actually help people understand what's happening to our society.
Mm-hmm.
Not everything has to be just about matters relating to the defense of the country or to the foreign affairs of the country or to those issues which are also extremely important. But I think our social life, our national life, and our cultural life, and our moral and ethical life, and what's happening to our society and the evils in our society,
Mm-hmm.
those are something that I think women journalists are very concerned about.
Mm-hmm.
I think women in media would like to um, bring all
Mm-hmm.
those social injustices and social inequalities to the fore. As
Mm-hmm.
B.R. Ambedkar said, a political democracy will not work unless at the base you have a social democracy.
Mm-hmm.
Democracy needs to be a social democracy. There's no
Mm-hmm.
point just having the power to vote.
Mm-hmm.
You actually have to change society. You need social transformation. You need
Right.
transformation in the way we look at each other. You need to attack inequality. You need to attack caste prejudices. You need to attack religious prejudices. You need to do away with gender injustices. So I think a lot of women journalists, and I know this from experience and my own experience, would certainly like to participate
Mm-hmm.
uh, in the social transformation of our country.
Right. And I was just wondering, you were saying how television has changed the field a lot with just because more women were able to come to the limelight. So has social media and digital media and digital journalism change equalize the field further, would you say, or has it increased the gap, or how is
Yeah, I think so. I think there are a lot of women doing YouTube and social media. I'm not sure about how many women journalists are actually doing that much YouTube or digital journalism, but I think a lot of women journalists are finding opportunities in digital media for sure.
Mhm.
Uh, but um, but I do think that television has equalized opportunities for women much more than the old newspaper journalism. And
Mhm.
digital, how much it's equalizing, I'm sure it is. I'm sure digital newsrooms are very democratic. I don't have much experience of them. It's after my time, but I'm sure women journalists are finding much more space and visibility and voice in the digital spheres as well. But I
Have
would
you ever?
I
Yeah.
would say that, I think for me, coming from print, I think television was the really dramatic, improvement uh, in um, in opportunities for women.
Right. Have you ever faced any threat to your safety when you went out on the field to report any time that you
Actually,
have
when you
to?
go out of Delhi, you're very safe. It's actually in Delhi that you're not safe. I had this one experience. I always talk about it. This was in, I think it was 2001. I was in the Indian Express, and I was sent to cover. We were doing a story called "In August Country." That is in all the places where the freedom struggle had taken place, and I was going to Betia
Mhm.
in Bihar,
Mhm.
right? It's in the Champaran district of
Mhm.
Bihar. In those days, the roads of Bihar were very bad,
Mhm.
and the roads were bad, and there was no light. I mean,
Mhm.
the rural highways were not lit at all. It was dark. So there was me, and there was the cameraman, and there was a driver, and we were going from Patna to Betia,
Mhm.
right? And it became dark very quickly,
Mhm.
and there was no light, and there was just us on the road, and there was just miles and miles of rural road,
Mhm.
and there was us in the car, and we were
Mhm.
going. And suddenly the driver stopped, and he said, didn't stop, but he looked back and said, koi aa raha hai.
Mhm.
So I mean, I was like, ooh, ooh. So we turned around and
Mhm.
we found that there were these three guys on horseback,
Mhm.
with their faces were sort of covered and muffled, and because it was
Yeah.
cold,
Mhm.
and their faces were muffled, and they were on horseback. And I thought,
Mhm.
oh my God, this is the end. This
Mhm.
is the end. I will be killed right here. I I will be dead. And there was no mobile phones and or anything in that time, you know.
Yeah.
So so I didn't have one at any rate.
Mhm.
So we were going there, and the photographer, the cameraman, who was supposed to be the male member of the team, he was like, "Madam, aap udhar jao, aap unse baat karo." I was like, "Oh, thank you very much." So
Yeah.
and at that moment, I must say, I was conscious of just
Mm.
pure terror. I was just incredibly, incredibly scared because, and that image still haunts me. It was dark night and these three guys on horseback, and there was us in the car. Anyway, I got out of the car, and it was just nothing. They were just farmers going, they were just riding
Okay.
the Ram Ramji, and they went off. So it was
Okay.
it was nothing. There was nothing to
Yeah.
be scared of. So I always tell this story as a kind of example of the kind of attitudes that we take
Mhm.
when we go outside to the field. That we're looking for terrors and horrors and fears everywhere.
Mhm.
And we're looking for sort of situations where we feel threatened. But actually, for me, at any rate, it was a real anticlimax. There was nothing to that story. There was nothing there. It was the most
Mhm.
safest thing.
Right.
So it was purely what I had manufactured in my head about, bandits and people coming to kill me and people coming to abduct me or something like that.
Mhm.
But it was nothing like that at all. It was actually very safe.
But today's India, do you think it's a more unsafe place for
I
women
don't know. I think
journalists?
it is more unsafe now. I think it's more unsafe now. In our time, you didn't have these people taking videos and people clicking, sort of taking out their smartphones. I think it was more safe actually in our time.
Mhm.
And you didn't have people say necessarily, the kind of aggression you see nowadays, the kind of
Mhm.
rage,
Mhm.
of social tensions that are in the air, the religious tensions in the air. There was less of that. I must say, every time I went into the field, I covered the Kumbh, I covered elections, I covered all kinds of stories.
Mhm.
I went to Bihar, I went to Gujarat after the riots, Gujarat riots of 2002. I always felt very safe.
Mhm.
I always felt very safe. I had one scary experience in Sri Lanka.
Okay.
I went to cover Sri Lanka. I went to cover stories, and that was after the civil war had ended, and I went to cover um, how life was returning to normal in Sri Lanka.
Mhm.
And I went to this northern village, and I
Mhm.
was coming back in a train,
Mhm.
and the soldier sort of got into the train,
Mhm.
saw that I was getting into the train, and got into the train, and suddenly came up to me and started barking questions. Where are you from? What are you doing here? What are you doing? Have you got a passport? What are you doing here? I was like, I didn't know what more. I was like, what? I just did a story on, how everything is wonderful here. Yes, I have my passport. Yes, I'm Indian. And he just went into this interrogation mode, and
Mhm.
then satisfied himself that everything was okay. And
Mhm.
immediately the atmosphere changed and he went.
Oh.
That was one again a moment of terror I had, because again I
Mhm.
was alone in the train in Sri Lanka and I was coming back.
Mhm.
Finally, we got back into Colombo and I was reassured. But it was just for that 5 minutes I was again quite scared. But
Right.
so these experiences you do have these experiences, but it's all part of the course, part of the job, and it's thrilling, it's very exciting, it's there's nothing quite like it. Notepad in hand, you're out into the field taking notes, talking to people, recording life. It's the best thing. It's very addictive.
Last, finally, ma'am, what advice would you have for a woman journalist of today? Your advice or your.
um my advice would be, first of all, be brave,
Mhm.
and see it as a calling. It's a
Mhm.
calling, not a career. You know,
Mhm.
if you see it as a calling, you will love it, you will give your best to it, and you will take all the hazards and the hardships that come with it. But if you see it as a career, if you're doing it for, for the money, anyway, there's no money in it. But if you're doing it for opportunities, or sort of brand building, or to try to becoming an influencer, or as people do these days,
Mhm.
that's not journalism. Journalism is a calling to tell the truth. And if you're excited by that, if you're
Mhm.
excited by the vocation that is journalism, journalism
Mhm.
is a vocation. It's a state of mind. If you're excited by that, then do it. But don't do it if you see it just purely as a career opportunity, or as a as just a matter of personal sort of professional mobility. That's not journalism. Journalism is something much more idealistic. It is something much more sort of, in a way, it's in a way much more to do with your moral and ethical outlook on life.
Mhm.
And if you are, if you have that calling, then
Mhm.
do it. But if you don't have that calling, then you will soon find that it's too much for you.
Thank you so much. Is there anything else that I missed out on that you'd like to tell me about?
I would also like to say that, I would like to say that I have said that, media is taken over by the government, and that it is Godi media, and that there's no place to tell the truth, etc. But I don't want to also paint a gloomy picture,
Yeah.
because I think there's lots happening in digital, in many websites. There's a
Mhm.
lively sort of digital universe out there. So
Mhm.
don't get discouraged. Uh,
Mhm.
do join journalism,
Mhm.
join to tell the truth, join to speak truth to power, join to question the powerful, join to question society. And there are many outlets in which you can do it now. It's not just necessarily the mainstream media. You can do it in all the alternative media spaces that exist. So
Mhm.
I don't want to paint a gloomy picture. Yes, things are bad. The
Mhm.
government has, the Modi government has captured the mainstream media. It
Mhm.
is very difficult to function in the mainstream media, but it's not all doom and gloom. So if you're
Okay.
possessed with that calling of journalism, and you're itching to tell the truth, and you want to take on the establishment, you want to ask questions, you want to change society, please
Mhm.
jump in.